Hello YouTube. Today has been a really mellow day. I took it easy because I woke up pretty sore after yesterday's crash, but I'm okay, and I'm very thankful that I didn't get more seriously hurt, because that was the kind of crash where you could get hurt much worse than I did. I got banged up a little bit and a scrape on my knee. Ooh, right? I mean, that's pretty minor consequences for what happened. So it's in the afternoon now. I believe it's coming up on 5 o'clock, and I'm gonna go do a more casual ride. But I did promise that I was gonna hit a couple of switchbacks and show you guys how I personally do them. There's many ways to do a switchback, and no, I'm not gonna do a fancy endo and kick my back wheel around and do it that way, or at least that's not the technique I'm gonna do. I might do that to show off, but no, there's a few different approaches to switchbacks. I'll talk about them. There's a descending one that I know of, and there's a climbing one that I know of. So let's go talk about them. Sweet. All right, here comes the switchback. Dropping my saddle. I use it to balance between my knees, take the widest line, come around, and flow. There we go. Okay, so you just saw me ride the switchback. You heard my keywords about taking the outside line, but before we talk about that, let's talk about what is a switchback. So I'm gonna try, let's go back here. I'm gonna try to show you what a switchback is. So as you'll see, I'm on a higher trail and there's a lower trail right down there. Switchbacks are generally, if you notice, the hillside is really steep, and on the outside of that turn it just drops straight off. So a switchback is a really tight turn. That's usually a thing they build because they kind of have to, because they're working with such a steep hillside and they need to do a 180-degree turn. And they're kind of fun, but they're also kind of sketchy if you don't know what you're doing. So let's talk about what to do or how to approach them. The first thing that I'm going to talk about is safety. Is if at any time you get to this point and you start freaking out, just stop. You don't come at these with a lot of speed. You want to slow down, come into it at like a little bit slower than medium speed, and then start your approach with your tire on the outside and come around. But if you feel a little nervous, or like, you know, like, just the best thing to do is always stop, put your inside foot down and scoot yourself around the corner, and then continue riding. Don't try to ride something like this if you're not confident enough to try it, and that's why right there. It is not a pleasant place to fall. I mean, that's a pretty good drop. You could get seriously hurt. So let's look at the switchback backwards. So you come from up there, you come around, really tight turn, and you come down. And this is on a green trail. So for all you green riders out there that don't have a lot of skill, if you don't feel confident with a turn like this, slow way down, put on your brakes, and just put your inside foot down, steer your bike, scoot, stay to the inside, stay away from that outside edge. Best option, or even better yet, if that even makes you nervous, stop, get off your bike, walk your bike around. I just really gonna stress that, because this is something you don't want to mess with doing if you're scared and nervous and you're gonna fall off the outside edge. So let's talk about those of you that actually do want to attempt to ride through this. I'm going to show you using my bike one of the things a lot of people don't know. Let's talk about it. Watch how, as I turn my front wheel, my front tire is here, my back tire is there. As I turn, my back tire goes way to the inside compared to where my front tire goes. So the front wheel goes outside and the rear wheel goes inside. Because of that, you don't want to approach a switchback on the far inside corner, because if you start turning, you're too close to the inside of the corner and it's much harder to turn, and you're going to run out of room over here on the outside. The way you want to approach a switchback is you want your front tire as far to the outside edge as possible. Then you start your turn, and now everything opens up and you have all this space here to work with, as opposed to if you go close to the inside, you don't have anything to work with. Once you're out here, you can now easily just keep your nice smooth turn going. As far as braking goes, I use almost exclusively rear brake as I come through the switchback, because I want the front wheel to roll through the turn and I want the back wheel to kind of pivot. Alright, so from the bike's perspective, I'm approaching the switchback, and if I go really tight, see this over to the right, and I try to make the turn, my back wheel risks hitting those rocks. And look at how little space. If I start looking my head around, I'm just kind of mimicking that with the camera. I don't have a lot of room to work with. I see the cliff right there and there's nowhere to work with. Now let's look at the difference if I take to the outside. Okay, so now I'm going to take it way to the outside. My front tire, now as I turn my head and look at how much room I have. All of a sudden everything opens up and you have all this room to work with. And now, sure, my front wheel might be out here near the edge, but I'm way more controlled and I have all that room to work with, and I can just turn right into the trail super easily. That's the where if I took the inside line, I would have no choice but to go way out there near that cliff edge. But by starting on the outside, I can kind of work my way more to the middle of the trail coming around. So that is the bigger difference on taking switchbacks, is when you approach them, work from the outside and go in. And then the other nice thing about that is you're going a pretty slow pace, and if you feel like, oh, it doesn't feel good or you're a little nervous, you can dab your inside foot and just kind of help yourself around, and that's always okay to do. And I've seen 5 riders come through here while I've been doing this filming, and three how many fingers do I have? 3 riders put their inside foot down and just scooted around the turn and then continued on. So it's very common. Don't be afraid to do that. It's kind of like a tripodal effect, if you want to call it that, and just gives you that extra assurance to help you pivot the corner. But still approach from the far outside even if you're going to do that, because that still gives you all that extra room. Okay, as I approach this, I drop the saddle, I slow my speed down, front tire to the far outside, standing, pedals level, feathering the back brake as I go through. I don't touch the front brake at all, and then I just ride it out. Hopefully that helps you a little bit handle switchbacks. Another thing I want to point out, I'll just keep riding while I'm talking about it, is that the bike stays mostly upright. You don't do a whole lot of bike lean when you're doing a switchback. You mostly keep it relatively upright. It's one of the few things where you actually use the turn of the handlebars to get through the switchback rather than the lean to get through. Someday I'll talk a little bit about high-speed cornering and slow-speed cornering, The higher speed you go, the more lean you want when you do a corner, and the lower speeds you want to be more vertical or perpendicular, I guess is the right term, to the ground, and you want to steer your handlebars to do the turn. There is definitely a little bit of lean, but there's a lot more steering the handlebars and pointing the bike where you want it to go. All right, let's go do the climbing. Okay, I'm coming up on this nasty climbing switchback. I'm getting into my lower gears, staying seated, tired of the outside, and I just pedal through it and climb out of the hole. Pretty straightforward, but can be really challenging pedaling through those. Okay, here's the uphill switchback. All the same rules apply. The bigger difference is you're going to be seated, so I'd leave your post up if you have a dropper post. Stay seated and bring your front tire again to the outside, far outside. You want to be in your lower gears, probably your lowest in this case. Have the front wheel track to the outside and steer and keep pedaling all the way through. Try to keep the bike as upright as possible, because then you'll make sure your back pedal or your inside pedal doesn't hit. And just pedal through, and it's kind of a little bit of a muscle move. Stay seated, pick your line, and come through. The key is to have your front wheel ride that outside edge of the switchback, because if you try to go for the inside, same thing will happen as with the downhill. You run out of options and it'll close off where you can go, and it'll actually make the climb a little bit steeper and harder. So yeah, I would stick to that outside line, stay seated, pedal on through. Let's watch it in action. So there you have it, the downhill switchback and the uphill switchback. The uphills have fewer high-risk consequence because you're not having to deal with the cliff edge in this case. You're not coming down and at the cliff. The cliff edge is usually on your lower side, and so you're coming into the high side. So they're a little less risky, and they're definitely something that takes a little bit of practice. And the biggest thing is you might spin out your rear wheel. That's why I suggest staying seated. By staying seated, you give your rear wheel a lot more traction. If you try to stand up and do it, you're likely going to break or spin your rear tire loose. So staying seated, in my opinion, is the best way to do it. Single speeders probably think differently. Cool, I'm gonna put the chassis back on. There's a couple of fun bermed switchbacks. I'm not gonna do any how-to with them, but I'll do some chassis footage of it, and then I'll end this video. I appreciate you supporting my channel. Please like and subscribe. Peace. Next couple are really tight. Oh, look at that. Ooh, same technique. Now we got one that goes to the left. Outside. Yeah, nice and smooth.